Ooh, shiny. Yep, that is right. After a long battle during Store Champ season, I'm finally happy to announce that I have finally got myself a Store Champ win after 3 failed attempts. Now, this one was a much smaller Store Champ. It was only 23 players. I know, only 23 sounds like an oxymoron, but considering that the last 3 Store Champs I've been to was size 52, 55, 77, yeah, 23 is a lot smaller. That's less than half the size of the other 3, any of the other 3. So basically, this is my 4th Store Champ, and I finally did it. Very happy because not only did I get my playmat, I also got the buy as well. Can't complain about that. Now, my decks did stunningly well, considering that they came at I didn't have too much practice with them. Um, Basically, I only dropped 2 games the entire day, and I finished as King of Swiss, as first seed. So strong that the next closest opponent to me won 2 fewer games. So that was a very good track record, and I'm pretty proud of that. And by extension, throughout the entire SC season, during all the Swiss rounds, which must have been at least 20, I think I've played more than 20 Swiss rounds throughout the 4 Store Champs I've been to. Not once did I get swept, or rather, I never got swept in any of the Swiss rounds except for one. That was against Genesis. Might know him as Andrew Hines. Yep, he's a very good player. But other than that, I actually managed to hold my own against most of the competition. So that's another pretty good moral victory for myself. So the decks I brought were a very conventional noise deck. I'll talk about that in a subsequent video. Today I'll be focusing on my co-op deck, which was a very off-the-wall Netrunner Soul deck. It's pretty similar to last year's Store Champ season, now that I think about it. A runner deck that is mostly conventional, and a co-op deck that no one saw coming. This seems like the perfect combination. Yeah, the magic antidote basically. So it even has a very similar backstory. So if you remember last year, if you were with me back then, my co-op deck was Space Tricks, which originated from playing on Octagon. Then it was Octagon, where I believe it was Netrunner who brought his deck to play against me. That Space Tricks deck, he played it against me. Said that it won a Store Champ in the US somewhere, or did very well, and I lost to it very hard. So I was like, okay, I'll learn from you. I'll try to copy your deck, and I ended up finishing first place with it. Same with this. I played on Jinteki.net against Corrigan. He smashed my face with the Netrunner Soul deck against my noise, and I was like, okay, this co-op deck's pretty good. I'm gonna copy it. I'm gonna give it a whirl myself, and it turned out to be pretty good. So I brought it to a tournament, and guess what? It went completely undefeated. The entire day, it won all 8 of its matches, which is a very impressive record. So this deck is called Lunisolar Flare. Once again, this naming was not done by myself. It came courtesy of one of our viewers, my viewers. Last year, Space Tricks was named by Flug Fiasco. This year, the name comes courtesy of one of my dedicated Patreon supporters, S Sniper. Lunisolar Flare, very nice name. Alright, so this is the deck list. I will be explaining every single card in detail. But judging by the deck list, from just by seeing the deck list, you can probably gauge the main win condition of this deck. You have the Astrotrain, you have Midseasons into Flatline, and you have Psychographics. A lot of routes to win, and this is why it's so versatile and so viable. So yes, as I said, it did very well on the day. The breakdown of the wins, there was 5 Flatlines and 3 Astrotrains. The Astrotrains were basically comboing at least 2 Astro scripts out into 15 minutes of breaking news, followed by a final 3-2 agenda. There was one game where I managed to fire off a Psycho Build for 5 points, but that game ended in a flatline because my opponent was running Clot with Clone Chip. So I was not able to finish the game on agenda points, but the pressure that I put on my opponent by taxing his 1 Clone Chip, he couldn't use the Clone Chip for Parasites or Fouls. That was a lot of pressure on him. This allowed me to finish off the game easier by spending time to draw and draw for my kill. So yeah, that's basically the breakdown of this deck. Turns out Flatline is pretty strong in a meta that's saturated with fouls. Speaking of which, one of the very important reasons why this deck won was because it was well positioned in the current meta. Same thing with Space Tricks. Back then, it was strong because criminals were rampant. So, deck design considerations for this Store Champ season is that I'm expecting a torrent of Anarchy all over the place. I want to punish anyone running the Wild Side Faust combo. And you can more or less expect that every single Anarch nowadays, any competitive Anarch for that matter, runs this combo. The other viable breaker suite that used to be was the standard Anarch breaker suite of Corroder York Mimic with clone ship support and parasites. That was known as the Ragas suite. It's now all but dead because importing clone chip and playing 3 parasites costs you 12 influence, which is way too much. So basically you don't really see the standard breaker suite in Anarch anymore. Instead, Faust is the go-to breaker. And of course it gets paired with Wildside. So this deck punishes Wildside Faust very well. I'll explain why in a bit. I was also expecting a lot of wizards because the latest and hottest deck on Netrunner DB and on SteamHack forums is Blueberry Wizard, which for those who are not in the loop is basically Wildside in Wizard with Levy and Faust. It's very strong because you can control your opponent's assets and get very strong medium decks with your draw power. I also want to neutral account Siphon because from where I play, I know a lot of people are pretty keen on Criminal. Last year, Criminal was all over the place and everyone played blue. This year, even though Criminal is the weak faction, there are still people who are enamored with Criminal, and Dave Hoyland's success with Dealer, I'm pretty sure that inspired some people to continue playing Criminal despite it being the worst position right now. So being able to neutral account Siphon, just as I did with Space Tricks, really helps position this deck very well in the current meta. If you are watching this video a few months in the future in a different meta, all these might not hold and this might not be a good deck anymore. But for now, this was a very good choice. So I'll be explaining more on why this deck is good against all these factors as I go through each of the cards, and I'll be going through every single card. We start with economy, the backbone of any good Netrunner deck. The economy in this deck is sufficient. It's not a lot, but it's sufficient without being excessive. This is very important. I always have an over tendency to load up too much on economy, jamming all the good economy cards into the deck. This leaves me with very few slots for tech and lowers the consistency of, for example, finding breakers. So with this deck, it's not particularly rich, but it gets the job done. Sweet Sweet and Hedge Fund are very important cards. It doesn't feel that way, but Sweet Sweet is actually an amazing economy card, considering compared to other factions which don't have this form of burst economy. This is very strong because Sweet Sweet actually enables mid-seasons early on in the game, which is a very crucial factor. Being Hedge Fund number 4, 5, 6 gives you a lot of advantage. The consistency of getting up to 9 credits at the start of each game cannot be underestimated. This is something that most other factions cannot claim. So this is actually really important. Tag on Explodapalooza. This is not something that you can willingly trigger most of the time, but when it does, you'll be very happy. Your opponent has to respect the fact that if they run the risk of giving you 5 credits straight off, which enables your mid-season. So they always have to keep that in mind. They might inadvertently trigger mid-seasons. Because the agenda both triggers mid-seasons and gives you the credits needed to pull mid-seasons off. They have to respect that. And this slows down their aggression. Finally, targeted marketing. I don't really think of this as an economy card because it's so conditional. Most runners attempt to play around it. Its inherent strength lies in exactly that, however. While it is not an economy card, it gives you control over the runner. They are forced to pick between a rock and hard place, basically. If they don't install their crucial card, they are slowing themselves down, which means that you have more time to get your money and to score your agendas. If they do try to trigger the targeted marketing, guess what? You don't need any more money for the rest of the game. You're set on mid-seasons and all your ice resin needs, because 10 credits brings you so much tempo. It's ridiculous. So, yes, before I move on to the next section, I just want to mention that if you notice, all of this economy is burst economy. There is no asset-based economy in this deck. There are no pop-up windows. There are no and this is very important. This goes back to countering Wizard and Noise to a certain extent, because Noise runs Imp. The best thing you can do against these decks is to not run asset-based economy that usually goes unprotected, like pet campaigns, like marked accounts. You don't want that because they can trash it way too easily, and that's just one less money card you have to work with. So yeah, we are slowly shifting back to a meta where burst economy is more favored, and this synergizes very well with this deck because firstly, your ice is pretty cheap to rest, so you don't really need the long-term economy, and more importantly, you want to really capitalize on the early game to pull yourself ahead of the runner early on so that you can threaten mid-seasons, which is very important, again, because most of my opposition that I'm expecting is Anarch. Anarchy doesn't generally find money very quickly in the early game as compared to Criminal with their bank jobs and siphons. Anarchs are very, very poor for the first 5 turns of the game, and if you can pull off a quick hedge fund, sweep, or if you can get them to steal a Palooza, you can almost certainly follow up the mid-seasons for a near guaranteed victory. So, how do you exploit your economic superiority over your opponent? Well, I've been mentioning it again and again, despite not talking about the card yet, it's mid-seasons. This is the linchpin of the deck. Because if you're playing New Angela Soul with targeted marketing as your main current, you want to find some way to leverage on the money. Sure, there are lots of ways to do that. You could play Ash, go a Glacier style, lots of big eyes like Tollbooth and Flare, but instead I'm going for what I feel is a superior approach, which is mid-season replacements. This is very strong in the current meta because Ice is weak against Anarch. They have Faust and David, they can get through anything. Let's face it. Let's go for something that they cannot disrupt so easily, which is mid-season replacements. Short of playing Imp and destroying your mid-seasons, you're going to get it off as long as you're richer than your opponent, and you will be, because, as I explained earlier, you have a lot of burst economy. And once you're tag flooding them, you need to make sure that you can secure the victory thereafter. Black cards are not enough. If you have played Butcher Shop before, you realize that life gets very difficult when they have Plus Creed and potentially I've Words in hand. Keep in mind, if you're expecting Anarch, you should know they're running I've Words. That combination of I've Words and Plus Creed basically neuters all your influence. We can't have that. So an alternative route I packed is Psychographics into Bill. So you have these 10 cards dedicated to leveraging on your mid-seasons. And of course you run 3 copies of mid-seasons because you want to fire off that mid-seasons early on should they steal an agenda. Punish them for their aggression. What if they don't play aggressively? Well, we'll look at that later. Film Critic. This counters mid-seasons. Again, if your linchpin is being countered, you need to pack the counter to the counter, and Snatch and Grab does exactly that. It also covers a bunch of other cards that I wasn't really that this deck does that I didn't really see on the day, such as Katie Jones. Some criminals like to sit back and load up Katie Jones. Well, you can Snatch and Grab her away. That opens up a couple more turns for you where your mid-season is live. Same thing with Professional Contacts. If they end their turn installing Proco and going down to 0, an easy Snatch and Grab means that you've basically forced them to play catch up for the next 2 or 3 turns, which is huge. Those are 2 to 3 turns you can spend to score your Astros, or to outright punish them with mid-seasons. Another side note, Snatch and Grab works with Aesops as well, so if your Noise opponent plays Wildside, Chronotype, Aesops on turn 1, guess what? You're gonna nab their Aesops, and they'll have to spend the next few turns trying to find the cash, and another copy of Aesops. It didn't really come into play on the day, because most of my opponents did not run connections, but I think it's still quite important to pack this, because there will be that one opponent that's running Film Critic, and you absolutely cannot allow your opponent to install Film Critic, because once they do, your mid-season plan is drained. That's a third of your deck that is nullified instantly. The alternative to killing Film Critic with Snatch and Grab is to kill it with Breaking News. Problem is, as you might remember, I only run 1 copy of Breaking News, so this is why I need a supplementary card in the form of Snatch and Grab. Siphon defense is also pretty important. I know I run targeted marketing, so I could use it for account siphon, but there are more things to protect than just account siphon. Christian protects against so many cards right now is ridiculous. You can protect against Medium Digs, Apocalypse, Wanton Destruction, which disrupts your combos, Maker's Eyes, Indexings, the list goes on forever. Christian Grid is a very well positioned card now, and with 1 influence to spare, I can't really think of any better card to splash on. Swordsman is very, very close, mind you, and if you're expecting a lot of anarchy, Swordsman might just be the better choice. But I prefer the Christian Grid, not only because of its versatility, but more importantly, as the corp, you get to play mind games with it. It could be a Cyberdex. The runner has to respect that. So, as I said, what happens if the runner plays around your mid-seasons? What if they don't run until they have enough money? As good as Burst Economy is for taking the credit lead early on against Anarchs, eventually Anarchs will outmoney you. ESOPs and cash is a very good money engine. They will keep milling you while getting more money than you eventually. And Liberator accounts is also pretty good money. So you need to capitalize on the early game very importantly. If you cannot land your mid-seasons, the next best thing you can do is Choo-choo! Yep, standard ambient shenanigans. You look at all the cards on the right, all the pictures, you realize that this is no different from your typical Astrobiotics deck. And that's true. You play just like Astrobiotics if they decide not to take the mid-seasons bait. Just chain out Astros, get those agendas out, try to get to match point with an Astro token as quickly as possible, because this is how you win games. That's what yellow is all about. Like it or not, this is how you play competitively. You play the best combo and abuse it to its fullest. So you have Astro script along with 2/1 agendas. This makes fast advancing very easy. A single copy of Cyberdex to make sure that Clot doesn't disrupt your plans, and fast track. Fast track is very important because if they choose not to contest your scoring remotes, you can just fast track and for an Astro, place in the scoring remote and put yourself far ahead of competition. And this works very well because you can lock your opponents out with targeted marketing. You can lock them out of your remote servers or force them to pay 10 credits to install their breaker against you. Yep, so I will talk about targeted marketing in a bit. I'll talk about it later. But yes, so basically that's the main win condition. And back to the earlier slide where I showed you the breakdown of my wins. There were quite a few wins that came from Astrotrains. That's quite important. It just goes to show that you don't just completely rely on mid-seasons. You need to have another route to victory, and Astrotrain is still a very cheap and easy way to secure games. If you get lucky enough and top deck your Astros, as I did in a couple of my games, this is just how you win. It's very simple as that. Standard way of NBN winning. And the flatline is just there to just punish runners who play very recklessly against you. So moving on to Ice. Ice is the weaker part of this deck and something that probably can be improved on when you are trying to replicate this deck for yourself. There are only 12 pieces of Ice in this deck because Ice is generally not that good against Faust David nowadays. So this is another tech against Faust David. You don't really play Glacier anymore. They can get through your Ice too easily. They can break your Ice, destroy your Ice. It's not fun to play Ice anymore. Ice is very weak in the current meta, so I rely less on Ice. Use it more as gear checks instead of trying to keep the runner out for as long as possible. And one of the best Ice in the game right now is none other than Newshound. This is a very big reason to play New Angela Sol. Make no mistake. I know the ability to keep targeted marketing in play is a big deal, but Newshound might just be as big of a deal as well. What's so good about Newshound? It is a punishing phase check. Taking one tag is a pretty big deal against this deck because I run lots of tag punishments. You have to clear the tag or beat the trace. And that is a tempo hit that runners have to think twice about before making early phase check runs. It's kind of like an Architect. Not as bad as an Architect, but one that is such a big tempo hit to the runner. It cannot be instant parasited, which is a big deal because there's lots of noise and clone chip parasite wizard that's running around right now. It is not in David range. This is so crucial. A lot of, especially Blueberry wizard out there, they're running 2 clone chips, 3 Davids. It's insane. you don't want to fight against David recursion. And this is just out of David range. It's at 4 strength, the sweet spot. Taxing to Faust, yet not Davidable. Again, I hate David's design because it has no upper bound. But since it has been designed this way, let's play around it. Let's play more 4 strength ice. Newshound does that. As I said, it's taxing for Faust. It costs 2 cards to break at a minimum. 3 if you want to avoid the tag as well. Being a sentry at strength 4 is a nice little bonus, but it's not very relevant in the current meta because I didn't really face many criminals or shapers on the day. But the fact that it's not in mimic range is a very big deal should you ever face against shapers or criminals. This also means that you actually have a proper sentry in your deck. Most NBN decks don't actually have proper sentries. They are forced to play stuff like Data Raven, Turnpike, Gutenberg, cards that are absolutely porous once the runner decides to go tag me. This still ends the run. That's a pretty big deal. Finally, it's all wrapped in a very nice package of 2 turrets. This makes it almost strictly better than Eli, and guess what? It costs no influence at all. The only downside is you really need to find that targeted marketing early on. But more on targeted marketing later. Binary Ice. As I said, taxing Ice is probably not that good right now due to David. So these Binary Ice are very important because they are the main reason you are able to score Astro Scripts out early. You want to score Astro Scripts, make no mistake. Without Biotic Labor or Sensitivity Grid in the deck, you have to score them the hard way, and these Ice allow you to do just that. They have a lot of double, aside from Quandary, the other 3 have double up, has a dual purpose. Wall Static costs 2 cards for Faust. Unless they run Data Sucker, they have to pay 2 cards, which is why I take it over Enigma. There's no Enigma in this deck because the runner can simply run Last Click and break only 1 subroutine. It is also slightly more resilient to Parasite. Wraparound forces out the David or the Corroder. It's a very good gear check. Resistor, it's pretty porous. I wouldn't really use it as a remote ice, but once you tag them with Midseasons, it becomes incredibly taxing. It forces David and it also synergizes very well with the rest of your 5+ strength ice, your wraparound, your big code gates. It's another form of David tax once they take the Midseasons. And once they take the Midseasons, it means that they have no more card draw. They can't play Wildside, they can't play Earthrise. It means that it's much harder for them to recur Davids. This is why Resistor becomes a monster post Midseasons. Pre-Midseasons, it's a bit taxing, but most importantly, it costs 0 to res. And same for the other binary ice as well. They're all very cheap to res, which means even if you don't see a hatch or sweeps early, you can still conceivably score out behind a remote, your first Astro. Sorry, that was very bad grammar. Excuse me. This is quite important because usually you want a double ice remote before you start scoring. And making a double ice remote with such cheap binary ice is very easy. You have 6 binary ice that are 3 or less to res, plus the News Hounds, which are 2 to res. So creating a scoring remote is dirt cheap with this setup, and you have all the ice to do it. For I won't say central ice, for bigger ice, because you do usually want to extend the game into the mid game, you need to still keep the runner out, and this is what these ice do. Archangel is pretty well positioned now, mostly because of its defensive capabilities. If it's accessed from R&D or HQ, you get to trigger it, and if they don't have their David out, they are going to get something bounced, be it their wild side or their medium. That's a pretty huge deal. The engine taxes for 2 David counters. Anything that forces 2 David counters out is very good right now, and Little Engine does exactly that. 2 Enderun subroutines, more than 5 strength, fantastic. Toll Booth is still one of the best ice in the game because it forces 3 credits from the runner. You have to be very careful when resing this ice though. It is the only expensive ice in this deck. Everything else costs 5 or fewer credits. Toll Booth is the only behemoth in this deck, real behemoth. And this is a problem if you are trying to learn a Midseasons. You have to be very careful where you place the Toll Booth and only res it when you can, when the time is right, basically. If you don't have any other choice, if they are medium digging you, of course you res it. But a lot of times you don't really want to res the Toll Booth. If you do, you want to make sure that the runner is appropriately taxed out. and I managed to do that one game. I sneaked what seemed to be an Astro script into a remote, guarded by a toll booth. My opponent, who was Noise, installed their David, got up to 3 credits, ran my server, they paid all their money, and their David counter, only to see a Jackson Howard at the end, which they couldn't even trash. That Jackson Howard became a very secure Jackson Howard. Ultimately, that allowed me to safely play the rest of the game without having to worry about Noise Mill. So that was a huge deal. The ability to Toll Booth basically offers you that utility to tax the runner out on shell games. So this is quite an important use of Toll Booth. And it's also something that is worth raising when they give you your targeted marketing money. So, and before you know it, I've just spent 25 minutes talking about cards. But wait, I'm not done. There's still targeted marketing. A card that I can spend an entire section lecturing about. Well, since it's been quite a long video so far, let's all take a break. When you're ready for the second half of this video, be sure to check out part 2 in my channel. See you later.